Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025, and today we are answering your composting questions, and we're talking about living mulches. I mean, it is Wednesday after all, so let's do it. All right, how cool was that theme song? That came to us from Randy Renfeld. If you're like, wait, what was the instrument there? That, my friends, was the great calliope, and Randy says they don't have any specific thing to point you towards today, except Randy's new band, Blues Rock Revival, who, Randy says, is available for bookings around Southern Illinois, so get on that, y'all, Southern Illinoisans. Also, musicians, please keep sending your theme songs into farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com as we celebrate 1 year of this ridiculous show. Otherwise, happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope you all are doing well and enjoying your week so far. Here, I have been, cruising into cover crop sowing season. However, I'm going to go a little more in depth on that next week once all of my winter kill cover crops are in and likely germinated or germinating. It will be super hot over this weekend and dry, so hopefully that all goes well and doesn't slow our pea germination too much, but we shall see. But this show is not just Jesse's weather diary, but it is also a show about you and gardening. So the theme of today, in fact, is that I noticed recently that there were several questions about compost rolling in over at the old YouTube channel. So I thought I would take the first and third segment of this show today and answer a few of those because there are some good ones that we haven't yet tackled. For instance, at Mark Robinson 9553 asked on a recent video, quote, "I raise meat rabbits and goats. Can I add their manure to my compost pile?" End quote. And at Craig Matheson 2736 asked, quote, "How about pet compost? I have chickens, ducks, including the trough they swim and defecate in, dogs and cats," end quote. So I added these questions / comments together because they were both asking, is there a manure I can't use to make compost out of? Well, first, the only manure that is officially not allowed in composting under the National Organic Program, NOP, and the Food Safety Modernization Act guidelines is humanure. That would be our manure. Now, I plan to do a whole segment on human manure at some point because human waste is a wasted resource, but it's also a complicated resource. And again, you can't use it when you're farming food. That will be sold to other humans to eat. So anyway, the short answer is that all of the above manures, again, except human manure, are technically allowed in organic compost production to be used as feedstock. That is like the material that you use to make the compost out of. The manure from pigs, ducks, cats, dogs, ferrets, labubus, you name it, those manures are all fair game. However, and this is an important however, any manures from animals run the risk of carrying pathogens. Cat feces, for instance, can carry a parasite, Toxoplasma gondii, which can cause toxoplasmosis. This parasite has been linked with miscarriages and birth defects, which is why it is not recommended that pregnant or breastfeeding moms clean litter boxes beyond just they should not have to clean out litter boxes when they're pregnant or breastfeeding because you are a decent partner. Of course, composting will reduce the risk of these contaminants, but I want to be clear that composting is not just throwing everything in a pile until it looks no longer like the stuff that was used to make the pile. Composting in terms of manure, especially when the compost will be used around food crops, requires specific heating and turning, along with additional carbon feedstocks and record keeping. In fact, if you are organic or selling the produce, you have to follow very specific guidelines for this, and I will link the organic tip sheet for composting in the show notes. For compost and in terms of food safety, you really do have to take manure seriously for the risk of contaminating your food. You do not want to make anyone sick. Of course, manure can be an excellent source of nutrients for a compost pile, or it can be an excellent source of pathogens, so it is worth really understanding how to use it properly. In fact, I found a small study out of Thailand that found, quote, "The composted cat manure exhibited significantly higher levels of calcium, phosphorus, and sulfur compared to other composted manures. Composted dog manure contained a significantly higher nitrogen content, while the potassium levels were notably higher in composted hen manure. Furthermore, the magnesium content was significantly higher in composted pig manure compared to other composted animal manures," end quote. So at very least, those pet manures in Thailand are comparable to other livestock manures, if not higher, for certain nutrients. That's fun. Like all things, diversity of inputs is the key to making a good compost. But I guess the short answer is that technically, yes, pet manures are not prohibited as the rules are currently written, so long as you take the composting process seriously. Obviously, some of this will depend on what you use for your cat litter or, say, hamster bedding, but a mix of manures can really bring in some interesting nutrients and biology to a well-made compost pile. It's not something we use, but what say you all about that? We can discuss it more on Friday. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk living mulch. BRB.
Hey, no-till growers, it's Austin with Vital Root Farm. Just sharing that here in Zone 3A, northern Minnesota, we already got toasted with a good frost on September 4. So the zucchini are done, and this buckwheat cover crop also not going to make it. Gotta love living in the coldest place in the nation.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmhand is the virtual assistant built for farmers, helping CSAs scale sales, run error-free fulfillment, and deliver 5-star service. Whether you're at 100 members or 1,000, Farmhand helps you grow without burning out. You've heard us and our farmers right here on Growers Daily. Explore farmer wins and learn more at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Nathan Leal Crisp, who writes, quote, I've been experimenting with all sorts of interplanting and nurse cropping combined and separately with a wide variety of annual vegetables, flowers, herbs, and other plants used typically for cover crops. I would love to hear if anyone else is experimenting with lots of various plant types that are able to grow and produce together. What is the management of it as well? Here's one I did this year, Zone 8A, Salisbury, North Carolina. I'm sure I said that wrong. Like we have a Versailles, Kentucky. You know, it's easy to get these things wrong. Anyway, they write, we amended the ground with 50% recommended fertility up front and just managed nutrients with AEA, that's Advancing Eco Agriculture, foliar applications, treated seed with Seed Flare and BioCoat Gold, both applications from Advancing Eco Agriculture. They broad-forked surface tillage using a precision depth roller, so that's like a very shallow tillage. And then Nathan goes on to say, hand broadcasted seed, what I call beneficial plants, buckwheat, mustards, radishes, cilantro, dill, Thai basil, marigolds, sweet alyssum, zinnias, kales, and collards. Applied AEA soil primer, applied thin layer of wood chips from the path using a back blower, hand spread thin layer of fine pine shavings. Our main crops grown with beneficial plants, but not the other main crops, were okra, summer squash, cucumbers, watermelons, and winter squash. I grew the black oil sunflowers with okra as well, but nowhere else. I managed the beneficial plants with a weed eater to allow the main crop to have the resources it needed while slowing down more aggressive plants like radishes, collards, mustards, buckwheat, etc. Depending on the spacing, the main crop grew not great to the best I've seen. We were trying to plant as fast as possible this year, but I think with proper seed mix rates, management, and soil moisture. Any thoughts or ideas? Thanks for all you and your team do. God bless. End quote. Okay, so interesting question / topic here, Nathan. Thank you. Now, it sounds like the idea here is much more about, say, like living mulches than interplanting, because most of the main crops that were sown were not intended for harvest, including the collards and radishes, mustards, etc. They were more included as a ground cover, as a living mulch. And my guess is that the crops that vined out, so that would be like cucumbers, watermelons, and winter squash, according to your list, did not do as well and were a lot harder to manage than the crops that stand straight up, like okra and maybe even the summer squashes. I have tried several different versions of living mulches like this, or nurse crops as you called them, like this, and mostly the results have been for anything that vines out, and oftentimes for everything else too. So long as there is adequate moisture and fertility, the taller crops like corn, okra, etc. can do okay. The challenge is, as I see it, is sort of threefold or maybe even fourfold. One, living mulches, especially with vining crops, are not super practical in a harvesting sense. A cucumber or butternut squash can easily disappear into a forest of tiny plants. Two, water management and fertility management have to be done really well, because although the plants will actually help retain some of the moisture, there will also be a lot of competition for the moisture at drier times especially. Three, the seeds most of us are using are not bred to manage this amount of competition and generally just don't perform that well, which could potentially be changed with a breeding program for highly competitive diverse plantings like that. And 4, since we're going to add a 4th, keeping those living mulches from turning to weeds can be tough, especially around vining crops. Like you can manage them with a weed whacker for a time, but as they vine out, you will risk weed whacking the crop as well. Now, if you were to establish a plant like okra, sunflowers, etc., and later sow the living mulch into that crop, that could work. That's often what we do. Like in the case of the okra this year, we planted the okra and then we sowed the teff underneath that. Or you sow the living crop early and smash it like a cover crop. That could be an option as well. But again, not so much in direct competition. You don't want them growing necessarily at the same time. You may remember that I tried planting some leftover melons into teff that I smashed down this season, and that was a failure because the teff just came back. But it also straight up stopped raining here for 2 months, so that didn't help and likely skewed the results a little bit. But my guess is that it would have probably failed either way just because that teff kind of bounced back. I should have instead terminated the teff and then planted the melons and got some of those same benefits. Now, that isn't to say living mulches won't work. It's just to say they don't necessarily make sense for every crop. Okra is one that I've had luck with, again, so long as there is an abundance of moisture. Corn does okay. Sunflowers do fine. You may want to give everything a little bit more space. In some cases, flowers may actually grow longer stems if you're doing like any sort of cut flower production with the competition. But the challenge there is the stems may also be weaker. So if you try it with a flower crop, say something low-lying like sweet alyssum or teff, then just proceed with small experiments first, no matter if you're growing flowers or food or whatever. This is why I'm much more interested in living pathways, honestly, rather than living mulches, because the pathways add some of the benefits to the gardens that the living mulches do, while also being more controllable and less in the way. Or like it is in the tunnel, I like the sweet alyssum beneath the tomatoes because the benefits the flowers bring, like the parasitic wasps and all those good things, and I like the moisture retention beneath all the growth as they sort of bush out. But in the field, I probably wouldn't do that so much for the poor airflow because I'm not pruning the tomatoes in the field, so having that sweet alyssum right up against the vines is not as good. For vining crops, I prefer mulches in the pathways and around them, like your wood chips or bare pathways, so that they can vine out, and then I can find the fruits when they're done. So I guess for me, my recommendation is just to try these ideas on a really, really small scale and compare them with the rest of your production that doesn't have, the living mulch underneath it and see which does better. Maybe start saving some of those seeds as well to get more of them primed for, that level of competition. That sort of stuff. Anyway, very interesting stuff. And I know there's a lot of potential here. It just is going to take a lot of work. Anyone else tried a living mulch and had success? Let us know. I'm not totally out on living mulches. There is some potential there. Like I said, it just has to be done right. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get back to compost. Be right back. Said back a lot there. It's all right.
Hey nerds, it's Nancy from Kindly Farms, 2 hours north of Toronto in Canada. I'm a certified veganic farm and I only use plant-based materials for my compost and my fertilizer. And I grow all kinds of produce and pollinators. I still have tomatoes and squash, pumpkins on the go. And I also use minimal till practices, living pathways. And I'm going to plant alfalfa for my winter cover crop.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, so I'm going to keep going on answering some of these compost questions I saw last week. Seem to be somewhat of a theme in the comments section on YouTube, so why not tackle a few? Fall is always, for me, a good composting time because I have the capacity to take it on, and often at least some of the materials. At AI 1.0, which may or may not actually just be an AI bot, I don't know, asked, quote, better adding char at the beginning of composting or when finished, end quote. And the answer is that there is a case to be made for either, but it depends. For instance, because raw biochar is a very carbon heavy material, it is basically just carbon, it is going to change your carbon to nitrogen ratio. So in a scenario where you don't have a lot of nitrogen, which describes us typically on our farm, then you would not want to add too much of the biochar before composting because it'll basically cease the composting process. In that case, it's better to add it in the curing stage after the compost is already made, and it can just sort of absorb some of those nutrients and microbes and stuff. Because like I said, it can straight up stop the thermophilic stage, the hot one, if added in too high of concentrations. So my preference generally here is to effectively finish that thermophilic stage before adding any sort of biochar or anything like that, which again is just specifically like a specially made charcoal. And then I allow that to sort of marry for a little while. Now, it's also possible to add a little biochar if you are starting to smell like off gases during the composting process. The biochar can help reduce the smell and any sort of like loss of methane, for instance. So it is nice to have a little on hand to use in, just in case. Just get to know your carbon to nitrogen ratios based on what you're using. There are all sorts of links for that sort of stuff on the, all over the internet, but I'll also link a guide to using biochar and compost in the show notes, so that will be helpful. At Mick Hegarty Grows asked on a video, quote, "I'm not sure this has been addressed, but it's been on my mind for a while. If you're collecting scraps from homes and restaurants that are most likely not 100% organic, how do you produce organic compost? Is there something in the process that turns non-organic base ingredients into certified organic products?" End quote. Great question. And so in order for a compost to be considered organic compliant, the ingredients do not necessarily need to be organic. I mean, really at all. In fact, you could make organic compliant compost out of feedlot beef manure and shredded conventional corn stalks if you wanted to, because it is less about the origins of the feedstocks and more about how the manure was processed in this case. So as long as the feedstocks are not prohibited, again, no human waste, no direct chemicals, that sort of stuff, and that proper temperature and turning regulations are met, then it will be considered okay for use on organic farms. Compost itself cannot be certified as organic. Some compost products, like soil mixes and such, can technically be OMRI listed or certified. For a certified organic farm, you have to either use compost that has met the National Organic Program guidelines, which the composter must be able to prove that they did that, or you have to follow what is called the 90-120 day rule with manure, meaning that the raw manure or manure that has not been properly composted, and that's even if it looks like compost, cannot go on the surface where food will be harvested within 120 days of something that touches the ground, like radishes or lettuce, etc., or 90 days before something that doesn't really, like a tomato, for instance. And certifiers take those timeframes very seriously. So today is like September 10th. If I put raw manure down on a garden bed right now, I would not be able to harvest something like tomatoes until December 9th or later. I mean, that is in a world where I can grow tomatoes this late in the year, obviously. And I would not be able to harvest something like lettuce until January 8th or after. That's 120 days from now. I mean, that's kind of the gist. Otherwise, let me know your all's questions or comments or anything else in regards to compost. We'll kind of try to tackle some of those on Friday. Otherwise, I think that's a Wednesday if ever there was one. But before we go, we're going to get a quick word from our friends at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are not only tax deductible for your year this year, whatever you did, maybe you need a tax break, but they're also greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, and to Randy for his version today, and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of September, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to no new signups today. That's all good. We've actually been on quite a run, so I feel really good about that. But we'll just have to leave Amy hanging, dealing with the troll until tomorrow, provided we have more signups. You all have been amazing and continue to be. We will see you then being tomorrow, also called Thursday, and it will be rad. Thanks for watching and or listening. Bye.